Welcome to the Three Wise Men of Divorce, Money, Psych, and Law podcast. Sit down with the California divorce experts, financial divorce consultant Mark Hill, psychologist Scott Weiner, and attorney Shawn Weber for a frank and casual conversation about divorce, separation, co-parenting, and the difficult decisions real people like you face during these tough times. We know that if you are looking at divorce or separation, it can be scary and overwhelming. With combined experience of over 70 years in divorce and conflict management, we are here for you and look forward to helping by sharing our unique ideas, thoughts, and perspectives on divorce, separation, and co-parenting.
Greetings, folks. This is Mark Hill with Shawn Weber. We are two of the three wise men of divorce. We're without Scott Weiner today, but we are going to plow on regardless.
We're a wise man short.
We are.
A couple tacos short of a combination platter.
We are 2/3 wise men. So, Shawn, I was driving home and I'm hearing Christmas music already.
Oh, I know. I was outraged when I heard it the other day in a shopping center.
I'm reminded of an artist who I love, a guy called Loudon Wainwright, who many of our listeners may know as the penner of the 70s top 10 hit Dead Skunk in the Middle of the Road. He has a song called Suddenly It's Christmas. And the first verse goes, suddenly it's Christmas, right after Halloween. Forget about Thanksgiving. There's nothing in between. And the truth of the matter is that as we move into the holiday season, we start thinking perhaps in different ways about our fellow man. And I know, Shawn, you had some thoughts around a concept that we might talk about today.
Well, I mean, okay, so we come from the horror and terror of Halloween, right? And some people may view their divorce as something akin to a Halloween haunted house experience. But you know, between Halloween and Christmas is this day, Thanksgiving. Which I think is kind of, you're right, it gets kind of glossed over. For me, it's the beginning of the holiday season when I celebrate Christmas. It's important for me, but I refuse to sing a Christmas carol before Thanksgiving. You know, but kind of thinking about gratitude when you're in the throes of something as traumatic as a divorce. You know, and
it's hard. It's hard to be thankful, isn't it?
Yeah, right. I mean, I've heard people say it's worse than a death.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard people say it was the worst experience of my life. I've heard people say it was totally worth it.
Yeah.
You know, there's that Willie Nelson quote, why is divorce so expensive? Because it's worth it.
Yeah. So, but at the same time, we've also seen people never get over it.
Yeah.
And spend the rest of their lives either going back and fighting it or being disadvantaged, and that's a polite term, by their connection to the past and not allowing themselves to have a future because they're so bitter about what occurred during the divorce.
Yeah. Yeah, it drags you down.
And yet, if you think about it, when you're married to somebody, there's always things you are grateful for. Yes, you might be mad at them, you might be upset about certain things, but there's obviously been things in your past where you have been grateful and thankful for what they've done for you. So perhaps we could talk a little bit about how incorporating some of those older feelings into the process might actually be a strategically smart thing to do.
Yeah, I always call it honoring what was good about your marriage as you transition out of this chapter in your life. Honoring what was good. Maybe things are rough right now, or maybe it's hard to think about what was good because maybe the behavior on the other side, maybe your own behavior, maybe just you feel like it's the end of the world. But what was good about that experience that you had, this chapter that you're closing now? What was good about that?
We had a case a few weeks back where there'd been a real disagreement about how a property owned by one spouse was going to be treated during the marriage, as there was a misunderstanding between the couple about whether it was going to become community property or whether it was going to remain the separate property of the spouse that owned it prior to marriage. And there was a real sort of push and shove around this. Wife felt that she'd been disadvantaged. Husband felt she was coming after something that was obviously his. And we were able to help have a conversation where she acknowledged that, you know, he had not deliberately tried to mislead her. And that she was appreciative of the fact that that was not what he was trying to do. And it really broke a logjam.
Yeah, it did.
A powerful expression of really, you know, not ascribing the worst motives. And again, we had another case today where we had a situation where the worst motives were being ascribed all the way through because of somebody's fear.
Yeah.
So
well, these negative emotions can really cloud what is good.
Yeah.
And okay, I'm not naive enough to think that there isn't a reason for the negative emotions, right? There's a history. There's a reason we're getting divorced. I always joke with people, you know, I get it. Things aren't butterflies and rainbows and unicorns. That's why you're in my office. But what can we do as far as looking forward and being present? And I was really impressed with this quote I found on the internet webs. You know, all good things are on the internet, right? By Melody Beattie. I'm not sure who that is. Beattie, but she said something smart. Gratitude makes sense of our past, brings peace for today, and creates vision for tomorrow. So how would we apply that to a divorce?
We've seen it where, you know, where we caucus with couples who are having a really hard time. The stay-at-home spouse feels totally underappreciated for all the things done, taking care of the home and the children. The working spouse feels unappreciated for all the effort put in and the hours and the, you know, what he or she had to put up with at work. And they're both in their separate corners feeling underappreciated. And just a word, you know what? The way you've taken care of the kids is the most important job we have, either of us have, and I really appreciate that.
Well, that was the couple today, right?
Yeah.
You know, there was an understanding that what she was doing to care for the kids was of supreme importance.
Right. And hearing that can help a lot. But then you hope for some reciprocity.
Right.
And that's where you don't always get it. If one is just too upset or unable to enter that generous spirit, then the person that made the generous offer feels, well, I was stupid. You know, here I am. I opened myself up. I showed vulnerability. And what happened was I got the door slammed in my face.
And it's really easy to slide at that point, isn't it?
It is, to say, well, that's the last time I'm doing that.
But I think you hit on something really important, and that is how gratitude and generosity are two sides of the same coin, aren't they? They go hand in glove.
Yeah. Yes, they do. Yeah.
It's a lot easier to be gracious when you're generous.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think about, you know, leaving what was bad in the past behind, but then focusing on what is good.
And I've had conversations with clients, Shawn, where I say, you know what, I can tell by the look on your face that you really don't want to say this, do you? You don't want to do this. I get it. It sticks in your craw and it's going to be a problem. Can I suggest you try it and see how it feels?
Just try it on.
Just try it on for size and see if you get the kind of reaction you expect and it's negative. Well, you know what? That's the worst it's going to get. Nothing bad's going to come of it beyond that. But you may be surprised. Try it. It might fit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what can people do to kind of focus on the positive? I mean, one thing that people can do is, number one, get the help that you need. If you need counseling, if you need a support group, if you need a divorce coach, get the support and help that you need so that you can get through the process. Okay.
And we've seen people throw up a lot of roadblocks. Oh, it's too expensive. Well, the most expensive thing you can do is not have a coach or a mental health professional who's assisting you and spend 2 or 3 hours with me and Shawn at our billing rates getting nowhere, having an emotional outburst from or with your spouse.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's penny wise and pound foolish, as we say.
Yeah. And I do think talking through issues, getting advice from people can be very supportive and helpful and can help you focus on what's good and what's ahead. I always think gratitude is about what's ahead, even though we were talking about I'm grateful for something that happened, but it moves you forward.
Yeah.
You know?
And it sets up a positive environment for the future, because the other person has heard that they actually have been acknowledged. So their future actions have the potential to be acknowledged in the same way, and they're more likely to repeat them because of that.
Which brings me to another point, and that is, there is a past, and I think it's okay to recognize that. We don't want to be, giving people pat answers. And, I'm sure there's somebody listening to this right now saying, well, that's easy for you to say, but you don't know what I've been through. I've been through this awful, horrible experience. So I think you can be real about what has kind of sucked.
Yeah.
And still be grateful.
So I would argue, be strategic.
Okay.
Maybe you feel you're being disingenuous and you don't really feel it, but as I say, try it on for size. I always ask people to think about what are they trying to achieve in outcome before they employ a methodology to get there. And that's often what happens. People come in with all their angers and their frustrations, and finally, now they've got a neutral third party, an arbiter who can listen to their complaints and take their side. And that is something, you're laughing, but it's so true. That's all I ever wanted was my day in court, and he won't give me that. So I'm delighted to have you and Shawn here, Mark, so you can see what a terrible person he is.
We want you to tell him how awful he's been to me.
And provide sanctions if he doesn't behave.
Well, that's what people are hoping when they go to court, right?
Yeah. And how does that generally work?
Well, it doesn't usually work very well, because you go to court. I find people are less grateful when they go to court, because what ends up happening is the day in court doesn't turn out the way they thought it would.
Yeah.
And I've heard so many people, if I could just tell a judge what kind of a jerk this person was or how awful this person was to me, but it doesn't, judges don't do that. They don't sit there and take sides other than to just apply the law.
And generally what they see is two people who a relatively few short years ago were able to make babies, who now cannot agree how to divide the furniture. Well, not a lot of sympathy there.
It's like that judge I was telling you about when I had a custody case, and he pointed his finger at my client and said, "Do you love your children?" And he pointed at the other client, "Do you love your children?" "Well, I don't love your children."
Go outside and sort this out.
And I think that's so real. I mean, just kind of being realistic about it.
Yeah.
Okay, so what can we be grateful in that moment? It's hard to think about gratitude when you're when you're locked in warfare.
So first of all, avoid the warfare.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a battle.
It's a difficult process. It's a process that requires your engagement in a time where you want to disengage. And that's tough in and of itself. But the way you divorce will inform so much about your future. It'll inform a lot about your children's future, but also your own happiness and sense of self. If you can look back on it and said, it was tough, but you know what? I did the best I could. And to some degree, I did okay. Yeah. We were able to work this out, and look, our kid did not get screwed up in this. That's an achievement in and of itself. So going back to what I said about being strategic, what outcome do you want? Now let's talk about the best way to get there.
Well, I've yet to have somebody say to me, the outcome I really want is to be as miserable as possible.
And I seldom have people come to me and say, you know what, I really want to screw him. I really want to nail him to the floor and make sure he gets nothing, or she's not getting any money from me, and the more I can make her life miserable. People don't come in saying that. They come in saying what? I just want what's fair.
I want what's fair. I want to find peace.
Yeah.
I want to move on.
So the role of the neutral is to help you understand that there is no fair. First of all, fairness is like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder.
It's where you sell a pig, right? Yeah.
Exactly. But at the same time, what is workable for you and what can make your relationship not go further south, especially if you have children. That's what you should be focusing on.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Gratitude is an attitude.
It is.
I think of that Christian hymn, count your blessings, name them one by one.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard that?
I have, yep.
And then you'll see what God's done for you. That's the point of the hymn. But I mean, people that exercise are actively and mindfully trying to develop an attitude of gratitude, do better. So if you can sit back and say things are just really awful, but if you can step back and just say, well, you know what? I have my health. I'm grateful for that. Maybe you don't have your health. Maybe you say, I'm grateful that my children are healthy.
And you know what? If I hadn't met this man or woman, I wouldn't have those children.
And look at, exist. Right.
And people never do that, but that's something.
Some do. Yeah,
well, it's a rarity. You're right, but it's a rarity.
Sometimes I have to point it out. Wow,
yes.
You know what? It's just, and I try to do this at the beginning of my mediations. You've seen me do this when we talk about what their big values are. And one of the things I do is I have them just name 3 characteristics of each of their children, each of them. And it's always wonderful things. It's rare that I get a characteristic. Well, my son's a real bastard. I rarely get that. I usually,
right.
He's smart and curious and funny and all these wonderful characteristics about their children. And then I kind of come back and say to them, okay, well, wow, that's great. You guys agree that you have 2 wonderful people as your children. What an achievement.
Mm-hmm.
We can be grateful for that. And I think when you focus on those kinds of things, that's really, really helpful. And it's easy to get caught up in, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to afford this house anymore. That comes up.
And it's his fault.
And it's his fault or it's her fault.
Exactly.
But you can say, but you know what? I'm grateful that I have food. Just start with those very small things.
Yep.
I'm grateful that I have food. I'm grateful that I have a roof over my head, even if it's not the one I want. I'm grateful that I have good kids.
I'm grateful that I have a spouse that came into this process of alternative dispute resolution with me.
Yeah. Or what if you have the terrorist on the other side? I'm grateful that I'm not the terrorist.
And I'm grateful that I am divorcing the terrorist and he will no longer be my husband.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that I do the same thing that you say, which is when I get this litany of complaints from about, she did this, he did that, and I go, and that's why you're divorcing him. And the reaction is always, you're right.
Right.
And it does help to ground, to remember that this litany of complaints, and that's why you're divorcing him and will not have to deal with this in the future. Isn't that great?
Yeah. Well, I sometimes I speak to a group of people at an organization called Second Saturday here in town, where they it's for women who are going through a divorce, and they come together and get information from professionals every second Saturday of the month. It's available. And I go there, and there's also a men's group that meets in the same day at the same location. And so usually what I do is we meet with the men, and it's funny to me because there's usually like 5 men sitting as far away as they can possibly be and still see the room.
Once I sent a client there one time, and I called him up and I said, so how was it? He goes, well, apart from being overwhelmed by the estrogen, it was fine.
Yeah. So then I go to, then you go to the women's group up, and there's 50 people in the room, and they're huddled together in packs. And I feel a little uncomfortable being a member of the male species walking in there. And I usually get some looks, right? But I start off by just asking them to list the emotions that they're having when they consider their divorce. And it usually starts up with, emotions of like terror, sad, angry,
Mm-hmm.
those kinds of just negative emotions. And then I said, does anybody have anything positive about their divorce that they're thinking about? And then all of a sudden it's like opening the floodgates, freedom, independence. I'm joyous that I'm getting a divorce. Some people can get to that. And then I always ask them, I said, okay, well, here's your thing. Would you rather have, I usually separate them on the whiteboard when I list them. And I'm like, would you rather have the things that are on this list of all the yucky things? Or would you rather have all these positive emotions as part of your divorce? Well, no one says, no, I really would like to have crippling depression. Nobody says that. They say, I would very much like to have those positive emotions. Well, what if I could show you a way to do that? And one way to do that would be to find a process where you take the high road and you focus on these good things, these good outcomes. But you're there, right? I mean, Mark, you've been through this.
Mm-hmm.
And was it always fun?
Oh, hell no. No, it was extraordinarily difficult each time.
I know I always joke that you're a serial monogamist.
I am a serial offender here. But the truth of the matter is you never go into it anticipating that it won't work. You go into it with the best of intentions. And when it doesn't, the question now becomes which is my best way to exit? How can I get out with the least damage is what people should be saying. And that's not what they're saying. Or if they do, they think of it purely in financial terms and not think about the consequences of getting winning the financial battle. You will lose the other battles that you inevitably will have to fight.
Do you think it's easier to see the positive the farther it is in your rear view window?
Of course. Yes, absolutely.
I do think that getting some distance between it.
I always tell people, first of all, it's going to take you a minimum of 2 to 3 years to recover from this financially, perhaps 5. That's the reality.
Yeah.
Okay?
Ouch. Okay. Yeah.
Yep. So don't expect any different. And also, time is a great healer. Because there's often situations where there's this new wonderful person in the life who's going to solve all the problems. But what's interesting is there may not be exactly the same problems, but there will be issues. Every marriage is a work in progress and requires effort and input. So
marriage is hard work for sure.
Exactly. And often the realization you come to is like, yeah, I'm having some challenges here. And looking back on the other marriage, I had some challenges there too. But, this one's awkward here. Didn't have that problem last time. So that marriage gets elevated a little bit sometimes as time goes by and you've got some comparison available.
That's interesting. Yeah. Well, a lot of people that I talk to that are the repeat offenders, as we're joking about. I have some clients that I want to give the bulk discount to,
Yeah.
But it's usually interesting by the time they get to the third divorce, they're a little more introspective than when they started with me. And they say, I've noticed one thing that is the constant here is me, and so there's that self-doubt, gosh, am I the problem here?
Yeah. Am I the difficult person to live with?
Yeah.
I've always thought it was the other person, right?
Right. But there is something about introspection from a real mindful place, right?
Yeah.
Just kind of, when you think of mindfulness, think of it as just kind of watching traffic go by as you watch yourself.
It's what the therapist will ask you. What did you have any role in this?
Right.
And what was your role? And that starts you thinking, when you come in pointing the finger and angry, you're not thinking about what might I have done to make things worse or to even initiate this, Well,
and how often do you see people that have experienced trauma? Maybe they've had a life-altering injury. I've seen people in wheelchairs, that. And there's two camps. There's the ones that just continually, and I don't know what it's like to have an injury like this, so I don't want to minimize what's going on with these folks, but I'm just reporting what people have said to me. You see people that are like, that's awful. They never recover emotionally from what happened to them. And then you have people that rise above it, and they almost all universally talk about how grateful they are for the experience of having been injured. And I always thought, how do you do that? how can you be grateful that somebody ran a stoplight and put you in a wheelchair? But they do it. And maybe going through a divorce is, it's not as awful maybe as being put in a wheelchair. Maybe in some ways it's worse. But is there something about the experience that when you look at it in hindsight, you can be grateful for it?
So what you're saying is, can you find an opportunity in the chaos, in the crisis?
Yeah.
What is the opportunity? And the opportunity is always for a little bit of growth, individual growth.
What did we learn? I'm grateful for the opportunity to learn and grow.
And I have seen that occur. One of the things I get to see from my standpoint as the financial is I have taken women who just have usually women, 9 out of 10 times it's a woman, sometimes it's a guy, but it's pretty much the woman who stayed home, concentrated on the family, raised the child, and now she has to handle her finances and she's terrified. She doesn't know how it works. He's been telling her there won't be enough money, that she shouldn't be getting a divorce, that she's going to be a bag lady, the kids won't be able to go to private school, whatever it is, and she's just panicked. And I will say to that person, look, you're a smart person. No one comes out of the womb knowing how the money works in a family. You got to learn. And you can do this. And I have watched people become empowered through this process. And actually, often what it does is it causes pause with the other person who has perceived themselves as the one who is the guru in this area. And suddenly they're being questioned, or their decisions perhaps are being regarded in a different light around the finances as the other person becomes more knowledgeable and educated.
One thing I've seen about, the people that do well emotionally during the divorce and the people that struggle a little more during the divorce, the people that do well continue to live. Like they don't some folks just become so depressed, it becomes debilitating. I've had people say, I can't even think. I'm not able to think right now. I don't know what's wrong with me. I can't think. Oh. But kind of getting out of that place where you are, that muck where you are, and living your life, making new plans, going out with friends, finding new friends if you don't have them, exercising, taking care of your body and your mind.
That's a big one, I believe. Yeah.
I think being able to, it's like, when you have the depressed person that won't get out of bed because they're depressed, they can't get themselves out of bed. And sometimes it takes someone to get in there and drag them out of bed and say, you've got to live your life, And I don't mean I'm not talking about folks that, have clinical medical depression where they only, it's a chemical, but some people just need to pull themselves out of it. And if you can't pull yourself out of it, then get the help you need to be able to pull yourself out so that you can have your head held up high and you can be strong and you can find things to be grateful for and to be happy about.
And be careful if you're trying to get the help from friends and family.
Yes.
Because they may not steer you in the right direction, which is the nicest way I can put it.
Well, we've talked about it on this podcast before, the Greek chorus of divorce.
Yep.
Right? And what we want people to do is find the support, be grateful for, I have people that love me, but then take their advice with a grain of salt and focus on professionals who can give the advice. Yeah, because we've seen a lot of heartache that way, right?
Yep, we have indeed. Well, looks like we've done it again, and we're able to do it without counselor.
Well, I'm grateful for this opportunity because it enabled me to step up outside of my comfort zone.
And also, it allowed you to play a psychologist on the podcast, even though you don't play one in real life.
Well, yeah, there you go. I'm an armchair psychologist.
There you go.
But you and I have seen enough of these divorces to kind of know.
Yeah,
we've seen. I always kind of joke with my clients. I've seen this movie before. You know.
Yep.
And there are certain principles, and pulling yourself up and being grateful, having an attitude of gratitude makes a difference in how happy you are through the process of the divorce. Maybe you're not happy at all, but maybe you could live with it and then you can move on and be happy later.
And think strategically, please.
Yeah.
Think about outcomes. Is what you're doing going to make things better, get a better result for you in the large scheme of things?
So our challenge to those of you that are out there, maybe you're eating your turkey by yourself this for the first time, pull out that journal and start making a list of what you can be grateful for. Think about the future. Think about pulling yourself out, because it does get better.
It does get better. There is life after divorce.
All right. Well, Mark, if they wanted to get a hold of you to talk about their money after divorce, what would they do?
They would go to my website, which is Pacific Divorce Management is my company, PACDivorce, PACDIVORCE.com.
And if you want to get a hold of me to solve any dispute that you have, we will match you with a mediator that will help you resolve your dispute. Go to WeberDisputeResolution.com. WeberDisputeResolution.com. Thanks for listening to another episode of the Three Wise Men of Divorce: Money, Psych, and Law. If you like what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share with others who may be in a similar place. Until next time, stay safe, healthy, and focused on a positive, bright future. This podcast is for informational purposes only. Every family law case is unique, so no legal, financial, or mental health advice is intended during this podcast. If you need help with your specific situation, feel free to schedule a time to speak with one of us for a personal consultation.